Erev Shabbat Shalom. This week, Parshat Shoftim opens with the concept of Shoftim v'Shotrim titen lecha. Place for yourself judges within your communities. And we live in a society that very often proclaims a great ethos of, I'm not here to judge. Whatever everyone does is okay. But ultimately, that act of not judging is in fact a judgment. And I want to look particularly at a Jewish value that is particularly pertinent to those dwelling in Israel. In about 3 weeks, Shemitah, the annual sabbatical year, will begin. And during that year, there's a debate that's been on for many, many years. What's the proper way to procure produce during the Shemitah year? It says that the land will rest, but the reality is that we know trees still produce food. We still have expectation of eating fruits and vegetables throughout the year. And there are a number of different kashrut agencies and kosher options that are available to the modern consumer. And the most popular one, the one that 80% of the produce, 85% of the produce in Israel falls into, is something called the heter mechira, the process in which the Jewish farmers are able to farm the land, the Jewish consumer is able to eat the food, and the halacha is still kept in a complex fashion. And recently, at least here in Zichron, there have been some people who suggested, I believe very wrongly, that that's not an ideal way to keep Shemitah, that really we should be looking for some other more stringent option. And I want to be very, very clear. I believe when you look at 85% of the Jewish population and say, I'm better than part of what they're doing is not acceptable spiritually for me, that comes at a great spiritual price. In the Jewish tradition, at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, there was a group of Jews who called themselves the Pirushim, who separated themselves off from Klal Yisrael, from the Jewish people. And they paid a great spiritual price. It's of unanimous agreement that Shemitah, during the time when we are not in, even though we're in Israel, our ancestral home, the land of Israel is not divided up into the tribes. The 12 tribes have not returned. In this context, each Jew does not have his or her own, each family doesn't have their own plot of land that is theirs to return to. And as such, Shemitah is at best a rabbinic mitzvah, a rabbinic commandment. And we have a general principle that when there's a debate among rabbinic commandments, safek de rabbanan lahakel, a safek, uncertainty, rabbinic commandment, we take a more lenient position. And I would argue perhaps a more stringent position in being part of the Jewish people. So as we come towards Shemitah, and different people try to sell you different stories of how to keep it in a more stringent way, I want to encourage each of us, and I myself will be doing this, to be stringent in our love and respect for our fellow Jews and being part of the Jewish people, being part of the rebirth of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel, whether we live here, whether we live overseas. That, in fact, is the message of redemption and the message of Ratzon Hashem, of God's will in our generation. Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov.